Welcome to the Empire Builders Podcast, teaching business owners the not-so-secret techniques that took famous businesses from mom and pop to major brands. Stephen Semple is a marketing consultant, story collector, and storyteller. I'm Stephen's sidekick and business partner, Dave Young. Before we get into today's episode, a word from our sponsor, which is, well, it's us. But we're highlighting ads we've written and produced for our clients. So here's one of those.
After serving more than 40 years as a good-natured technician, Jeff Hurley is retiring from Summers & Zims. When you've known a person that long, they truly become family. You come to rely on them, knowing they'll be there for you during the best of times, and while more importantly, during those times that aren't so good. Scott DiEugenio is another good-natured Summers & Zims family member you can always count on. Even though Scott isn't ready to retire, his wife accepted a new job in Williamsport. Soon he'll be moving there with his family. We'll all keep in touch, I'm sure, but I'll miss not seeing Jeff and Scott every day. See, their hard work and their heartfelt dedication is something I look for in every person I hire. I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm Joe Zimmerman from Summers & Zims, and my solemn promise to you is that every technician I have is someone I would trust with my very own family, home, and safety, which is why you can feel safe trusting them with yours.
So, Stephen, when you said that we were going to be talking about Dr. Brinkley, and you asked if I had heard of Brinkley, the only Brinkley that sprang to mind was Christie Brinkley, the Uptown Girl that Billy Joel sang about years ago. Any relation?
Well, maybe distant. He was born in 1885.
Oh, so yeah, not so much.
Not so much. I want to say I purposely didn't share anything with you ahead of time because there's a couple of fun twists and turns in this story, and I really wanted your unedited reaction. So what I'm assuming here is you've actually never heard of Dr. John R. Brinkley.
I have not, no.
You have not, okay. Well, he was born back, as mentioned, 1885, and what we're going to talk about happened between 1915 and 1940. So from the end of World War I through the Great Depression and into the start of World War II.
Okay.
First of all, he was a doctor back in 1920s and 1930s, and during that time, he built a business where he made $1 million a year in 1920 dollars.
That's too big shabby.
Here's the other interesting thing with this guy. He ran for governor of Kansas as an independent, and he was so popular that he almost won on a write-in ballot, right? So that's a ballot where your name's not on the ballot. People have to write your name in. He got 29.5% of the vote on a write-in ballot. He was also a major driving force in the creation of the American Medical Association.
Okay.
So there's a lot that we can learn about him.
I have heard of the American Medical Association.
Heard of American Medical Association, of course. Now, the Empire Builders Podcast is about reverse engineering business success. So what we're going to talk about today is how he promoted himself. And the thing that's really interesting about it is we're going to look back, and a lot of people will say, oh, well, that worked in the 1920s and it won't work today, or that was on radio and we're doing online advertising. And what we know is one of the most popular marketing areas today is the internet. And one of the most sophisticated techniques is content marketing. You know, guys like Ryan Dice have made a fortune on content marketing. Ryan runs Digital Marketer, the Info Summits, one of the biggest people in the internet. And Ryan is also the chair of the Wizard Academy. Dave, what's your new role at the Wizard Academy?
Vice Chancellor at the Wizard Academy.
Yeah, and Dave's Vice Chancellor. But back to content marketing. So content marketing is this idea of offering a piece of content to attract people. The consumer reads or watches the content that brings them into your world. And then if you're smart like Ryan, you'd have a process, today it's email, et cetera, to continue to communicate.
I would add, they listen to it too. I mean, a podcast is definitely content marketing.
It's content marketing. And the idea is then, you've got an ascension program. There's a next step that they take. And of course, the best type of content marketing is that if you can get somebody to pay for a little piece of the content, and this is called, and if it pays for the marketing, it's ideal. That's called a self-liquidating offer. So here's why we're talking about Dr. Brinkley. The thing is, internet marketers today think they invented content marketing. And guess what? It ain't new.
Right.
It's not a new idea. So here's what I'm going to share with you. I want to share with you, Dave, a snippet of a radio advertisement that happened over 100 years ago from Dr. Brinkley. So you ready?
Now, before I proceed with my talk, there is a thought that I want to leave with you, and that is this. These books, these doctor books, discussing our work, discussing your health, discussing your disease, are limited in number, and they are going fast. When the present supply is exhausted, I will not have any more to give away. I'm asking you to get your order in at once for a free copy of this book containing questions for men to answer, questions for women to answer.
And guess what it was for?
Questions for men to answer.
Yes, this book was for solving the problem of male erectile dysfunction. There is nothing new out there.
Here I thought Bob Dole was the first guy to advertise products for that. Nope.
No, Dr. Brinkley. And the reason why I wanted to share this whole Empire Builders podcast is the idea of reverse engineering success and looking at things in the past and really proving it still works today. Content marketing works today. Advertising a book works today. There's nothing new. Now, the one thing that is new, that was actually a fairly long advertisement. And if you remember back when we talked about Pat Weaver, back in the 1920s, radio wasn't done where the radio station created a show. As we know, what happened was Dr. Brinkley created an entire show and then inserted his ads in it, because that's the way advertising used to be done. And if people want to learn a little bit more about that, they can go back to the podcast on Pat Weaver. Pat Weaver is really the one who changed that.
But that's also, I mean, that fits the model, doesn't it? I mean, you're creating the program and you're sliding in a little promo for yourself. I think we do that in the middle of the Empire Builders podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
We kind of do. So back to Brinkley. So he created a show and he sponsored it. It was a variety show and it was a massive success. But why have we never heard about this guy? He's done all these things. How is it that there's not monuments to him? Well, this is where social media is kind of going to hate me. Guys, please sit down. He was a complete fraud. Want to know what his solution was for male erectile dysfunction?
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Brought to you by the Least Full of Shit Marketers Association of America. Yes, that's a low bar, but we clear it mightily. We're also the largest pay-per-performance branding group in North America, and that part's for reals. If you're looking for advertising advice geared towards local owner-operated companies, this is your podcast. And now you can pick the brains of these advertising geniuses over lunch without having to pay for lunch or even leave your office. We're talking 90 minutes of straight answers to all your burning questions about lead generation, customer acquisition, mass media branding, how to get off the paper crack treadmill, anything you want. And the only coin required is candor. Because we can't give no bullshit advice without basing it off no BS data on your company, competitive landscape, operations, and all that jazz. We send you a pre-Zoom questionnaire. You fill it out candidly, and boom, Bob's your uncle. You're in like Flynn, and we'll be frank as fuck in giving you the straight scoop on all the advertising and business growth questions you always wanted to know, but were too afraid to ask. You'll also get our no pitching and no bitching guarantee. No pitching means we won't pitch you or try to sell you in any way. If you want more after 90 minutes, you'll have to ask. And no bitching means if you don't think the meeting was worth your 90 minutes, we'll send you $100. Consider it us picking up the tab for lunch and putting our money where our mouth is. Sound like a not so full of shit offer? Well, that is what we're known for. Take us up on it at empirebuildersprogram.com.
Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
Want to know what his solution was for male erectile dysfunction?
Send him money.
No, he actually did. Yeah. You sent him money and he actually did do a procedure. Do you want to know what he did in the procedure?
Oh, God, I'm afraid to ask.
Yeah, you really should be, because basically he removed your testicles and replaced them with goat testicles.
Oh.
I'm not making this up.
I hadn't thought of that one.
There's a good reason. But here's the other thing he did in his marketing that's also really interesting. Because so many times we go, well, target the consumer, target the consumer. So in this case, target, it's a male problem, target the men. What they actually learned, Dr. Brinkley's wife also did a program targeting women.
Right.
And it was equally successful. It was equally successful. Talking to influencers is as important as talking to the people who have the problem.
Oh my gosh, you come home from the coal mine and the little lady tells you she's signed you up for some goat nuts.
Exactly. Now, he was so prolific and so popular. Like, one of the reasons why he was in on a write-in ballot is the Republican Party and the Democratic Party would have nothing to do with him. And the reason why he wanted to run for governor is basically the state was trying to shut him down. The reason why the American Medical Association, he was influential in its birth. One of the reasons why it was born was to shut Brinkley down.
Yeah.
He actually even got shut down from being able to do radio broadcasting in the United States. And he went down to Mexico and just went across the border of Mexico and built a huge radio station that basically beamed all across the United States. And sidebar, for those of you who are old enough to remember Wolfman Jack, that was actually where Wolfman Jack did his broadcast from.
Yeah.
It was the radio station that Brinkley had built. And maybe we should do an episode sometime on Wolfman Jack. But here's the thing. He created advertising standards for doctors. He created standards for doctors. There's actually a book, if you want to read more about Brinkley. It's really quite remarkable, all the way things that they did to try to shut this guy down and all the things he did. They'll actually kind of make you shudder, but it's a book.
It's the slippery steps that a charlatan will take to just keep fleecing people are just amazing, right? They'll run for office. Oh, yeah. Let's not go there. What's the book, Steve?
It's called Charlatan by Dan Kennedy. It's quite wild. And it's even wild at those days, the standards that were required to actually become a doctor. But again, the big lesson we want to share here is when we look back at these techniques from the past, don't dismiss them.
Right.
A lot of the most modern marketing techniques have their origins back a long time ago when people made it work. And all of a sudden, all that's changed is they said, okay, you can do a book, promote the content, have people read the content, they become a customer. That was done on radio. So today, let's do it on the web. But the idea is not new. The idea is old.
Yeah. We were just sitting at Wizard Academy yesterday talking about this. And in the classes that we teach, well, one of the things we like to point out is you can use these advertising and marketing techniques for good, and they equally work for evil.
They certainly can. Yeah.
Right.
Because it's the issue of persuading people.
The techniques are the same.
The techniques are absolutely the same. Now, here's the interesting thing that I've tended to notice, because Brinkley, at the end of the day, he died alone and he died penniless because eventually everything caught up to him and he lost everything. And so that tends to be a pretty common theme for people who use this stuff for evil, is it tends to catch up to them. I just found it funny when I came across this ad where it's a book, content marketing on the radio for a male erectile dysfunction, done over 100 years ago, really successfully. I thought, there's kind of a little bit of a message and story to share there.
In these weird times, it's like I can hear people going to their local doctor and saying, no, this will work. I've done my own research. I listened to Dr. Brinkley.
Well, and here's the crazy thing on that. Dr. Brinkley actually had a huge number of testimonials and people who actually stood up in front of the American Medical Association and said, no, this procedure worked, including women who got pregnant afterwards.
Yeah, so complete charlatan, right? We know that won't work.
Right. To your point, from the researching standpoint, well, he's got all these testimonials. He's got these women who they got pregnant afterwards. Like, it's really... there's we all know there's lots of companies out there that are willing to sell you a whole bunch of fake Google reviews and fake Amazon reviews and fake testimonials to do exactly what this guy did. It's true. The lesson I want people to take away from this, though, Dave, is, and again, I agree with you. You can use this for good or evil. We're here for good, to build good businesses and help them succeed. But there's a lot of lessons. Don't ignore the past. There's lots of great lessons. There's lots of amazing campaigns that have been done in the past and be reworked a little bit today to make them work. And people who are marching around thinking they invented these techniques did not invent these techniques. These techniques have been around for a long time. And in fact, I would argue it used to be harder, because today you see something on Facebook, you just click on it, you can order it, you can download it, whatever. In Brinkley's day, that's being broadcast over a radio, and he charged $1 for the books. So you got to handwrite out an envelope and handwrite out a check and get a stamp and mail it. It was way harder to make those things happen, which means their messaging had to be significantly stronger than it is today. And and if you're just wanting to have an entertaining read the book Charlatan. It's
fascinating.
It is fascinating and really quite remarkable.
All right. Well, what a I would say a great lesson. It's a lesson that we just keep having to learn over and over again. So pay attention to it. Repeat history in your favor.
Yeah, just do good.
Do good. Use these things for good.
Exactly.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to schedule your own 90-minute empire building session, you can do it at empirebuildingprogram.com.